daily hustle. Among the chaos stood Desmond's newly opened gym, an oasis of modernity and hope for those dreaming of toned bodies and perfect physiques. The gym's bold the buzzing streets of Lagos's bustling suburb were alive with energy as residents went about their daily hustle. Among the chaos stood Desmond's newly opened gym, an oasis of modernity and hope for those dreaming of toned bodies and perfect physiques. The gym's bold banner, "Flat Tummy for Christmas Guaranteed," caught everyone's attention, promising miraculous transformations just in time for the festive season. Desmond, the gym instructor, was a charismatic figure who oozed charm and confidence, drawing women of all ages into his fitness haven. Anita, a successful socialite with a demanding lifestyle, was among the first to sign up. Juggling high society events, she wanted to maintain her perfect image for the Christmas galas. Then there was Rose, a single mother who saw the program as a chance to regain her confidence. Lastly, Kemi, an aspiring Nollywood actress, believed a flat tummy could be her ticket to landing major roles. The women were captivated not only by Desmond's fitness promises but also by his infectious energy. Unbeknownst to them, stepping into Desmond's gym would change their lives in ways they could never have imagined. Desmond was more than just a gym instructor. He was a master of persuasion. From the moment clients walked into the gym, his warm smile and smooth words made them feel like they were already achieving their fitness goals. Desmond had a way of making each client feel special, tailoring his approach to their individual insecurities. For Anita, he was professional and respectful, often complimenting her dedication and poise. For Rose, he was empathetic, praising her strength as a single mother and reassuring her that she could reclaim her confidence. Kemi, on the other hand, received playful banter and flirtatious remarks, making her feel like the star she aspired to be. The gym quickly became a second home for the women, and Desmond was at the center of it all. His Flat Tummy Miracle program involved a strict exercise regimen, a special diet plan, and the highlight, Desmond's signature drink, a green concoction he claimed was made from natural herbs. The drink, he said, was the secret weapon for shedding belly fat fast. The women trusted him, hanging on his every word, unaware of the web of lies and deceit he was weaving behind the scenes. Desmond unveiled his secret weapon during a special fitness class one Monday morning. Holding up a bottle of green liquid, he described it as a revolutionary herbal concoction. "This drink," he declared with dramatic flair, "will burn belly fat while you sleep. Combined with our workouts, it's the ultimate weapon for your flat tummy dreams." Anita, sitting at the back, raised a skeptical eyebrow but decided to give it a try after hearing the enthusiastic cheers from the other women. Rose, ever eager to regain her youthful figure, eagerly signed up for Desmond's premium program, which included weekly supplies of the miracle drink. Kemi, driven by her aspirations of stardom, bought 2 bottles that same day. The drink tasted odd, bitter, with a strange aftertaste, but the women convinced themselves it was the price of beauty. Desmond insisted the ingredients were all natural, sourced from the finest local herbs, though he never disclosed what they were. By the end of the week, all 3 women began to notice subtle changes. Their waistlines seemed slimmer, and Desmond's praise fueled their motivation. But unbeknownst to them, the drink was more than a herbal concoction. It was the first step in Desmond's carefully orchestrated plan. The first week brought unexpected enthusiasm to the gym. Anita was the first to notice her clothes fitting more loosely around her waist. "Desmond, I think this is actually working," she exclaimed after a Saturday morning workout. Her confidence grew as he nodded approvingly, offering a well-timed compliment about her commitment. Rose, too, began to feel a change. Her usual tiredness seemed to vanish, and she even caught herself smiling more at her reflection. "This is the new me," she whispered, excited to show off her progress at her church's end-of-year celebration. For Kemi, the transformation felt almost magical. Every selfie she posted seemed to garner more likes, fueling her belief that stardom was within reach. Desmond's constant attention to her progress only added to her excitement. However, the changes weren't all positive. Rose felt occasional dizziness, which she dismissed as hunger from the diet. Kemi started waking up in the middle of the night, sweating but unable to remember her dreams. Anita ignored a slight unease in her stomach, chalking it up to adjusting to the drink. Their focus remained on their progress, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect results. As the days turned into weeks, the women became more obsessed with their progress. Desmond capitalized on their enthusiasm, introducing additional routines and exclusive meal plans for a higher fee. "If you stick to this, you'll achieve the impossible," he would say, his tone dripping with conviction. Anita doubled her efforts, attending every morning and evening class. She even convinced a few friends to join the program, becoming a walking advertisement for Desmond's methods. Rose, eager to outshine her judgmental in-laws during the Christmas family gathering, became more withdrawn from her usual activities, dedicating all her time to the program. Kemi, on the other hand, started avoiding auditions, convinced that her new look would soon open doors to better opportunities. However, small warning signs began to surface. Anita noticed persistent bloating but ignored it, fearing it would undo her progress. Rose's energy would drop suddenly, leaving her lightheaded during workouts. Desmond brushed off these concerns, attributing them to their bodies adjusting to the cleanse. Still, the women's trust in him grew stronger, even as cracks in the facade began to show. One evening, Anita stayed behind after class to ask Desmond a question that had been nagging at her. "What exactly is in the drink?" she asked, crossing her arms as she leaned against the counter. Desmond's face didn't flinch, his smooth tone brushing away her concerns. "Local herbs, very potent but completely natural. Trust me, Anita. Do you think I'd offer anything unsafe?" He gave her one of his winning smiles, and for the moment, her doubts subsided. Meanwhile, Rose was growing uneasy. Her energy crashes were becoming more frequent, and she had started noticing unusual cravings for salty foods. She mentioned it casually to Kemi during a workout, but Kemi waved it off. "We're just working harder than usual. It's probably nothing." However, deep inside, Rose couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. That night, as she prepared her meal plan for the next day, she decided to pay closer attention to how her body was reacting. Still, she didn't dare bring up her concerns with Desmond, fearing she would be seen as ungrateful or weak. One chilly December morning, Kemi woke up with a sharp pain in her lower abdomen. She dismissed it as muscle soreness from the intensive workouts Desmond had prescribed. At the gym, she pushed through the exercises despite the discomfort, refusing to let anything derail her progress. Desmond praised her determination, calling her one of the most focused clients he'd ever worked with. Her cheeks flushed with pride, and she ignored the growing unease in her stomach. Rose, meanwhile, started keeping a journal of her symptoms. Every time she felt dizzy or fatigued, she wrote it down, hoping to find a pattern. When she brought it up to Anita over smoothies after class, Anita shrugged it off. "It's probably just stress. The holidays are always overwhelming," she suggested. But that evening, Anita noticed something odd. Her favorite dress, which she had bought for a party, no longer fit around her waist. Her stomach seemed slightly rounder, not flatter. She frowned at her reflection, a small seed of doubt taking root in her mind. Anita couldn't ignore the changes any longer. She made an appointment with her doctor, hoping to find a simple explanation for her bloating. The results left her in shock. She was pregnant. Her mind raced as she tried to piece together what had happened. She hadn't been with anyone since her last breakup months ago. How was this possible? Her doctor's questions about her diet and lifestyle left her fumbling for answers. At the gym, Rose overheard a conversation that made her stomach churn. Two clients were whispering about Desmond, joking that he was too good-looking to be just a trainer. The words stuck with her as she completed her routine, her mind filled with unease. Later that evening, as she reviewed her symptoms journal, a terrifying thought crossed her mind. Could it be possible? Her hands trembled as she held her stomach, the seed of suspicion growing stronger. The next day, Anita cornered Rose in the locker room. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice shaky. Rose hesitated, sensing something serious. As Anita explained her situation, Rose felt her legs weaken. "I've been feeling off too," she admitted. The two women decided to visit the doctor together, desperate for answers. The results confirmed their fears. Both were pregnant. The doctor's questions about their health and habits led them to the one common denominator: Desmond's gym. Shocked and furious, they returned to the gym to confront him. But Desmond was nowhere to be found. Kemi, who had been listening in on their heated conversation, suddenly felt a wave of nausea. "Wait," she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "What if it's happening to me too?" Desmond's absence from the gym was as sudden as it was suspicious. Anita, Rose, and Kemi had planned to confront him together, but when they arrived at the gym, the doors were locked and the lights were off. His phone went straight to voicemail, and none of his regular staff members had heard from him in days. The women stood in front of the gym, their frustrations bubbling over. "This is ridiculous," Anita said, slamming her hand against the door. "He's disappeared, and now we're left to deal with this on our own." Feeling a mix of anger and betrayal, Rose suggested they look for answers elsewhere. "Maybe someone knows what's going on," she said, her voice shaky. They began asking around, speaking to other gym members and even to the landlord who owned the building. But no one seemed to know where Desmond had gone. The more they dug, the more it became clear. Desmond had vanished, leaving behind a trail of confusion and suspicion. As they walked away from the gym, Anita's mind raced with possibilities. What kind of man was Desmond? How could he do this to them? As the women struggled to process the recent events, a sense of dread slowly crept into their minds. The more they thought about Desmond's sudden disappearance, the more they realized how little they actually knew about him. They had trusted him without question, believing in his promises and basking in the flattering attention he showered on them. Now, they felt betrayed. The trio met again, this time in Anita's upscale apartment, where they pieced together everything they knew about Desmond. "He was always so charming, so attentive," Rose said, her voice filled with frustration. "But I should have noticed something was off. He never told us the truth about the drink or the program." Kemi nodded, recalling how Desmond always made sure to keep the focus on their progress, never offering any real details about the ingredients or the actual effects of his methods. As they spoke, a horrifying thought crossed Anita's mind. What if this wasn't just a scam? She asked, her voice trembling. What if this is something more sinister? Determined to uncover the truth, the women decided to take matters into their own hands. They began by retracing their steps, questioning anyone who might have had contact with Desmond. A few gym-goers recalled seeing Desmond meeting with a shady-looking man a week before his disappearance, but no one knew who he was. The more they dug, the more elusive their answers became. The gym seemed to hold no records of any outside contacts or suppliers. Anita took the initiative to contact the local authorities, but the police were quick to dismiss her concerns as private matters not worth pursuing. They told her to let them know if she found anything more concrete. Frustrated but not deterred, Anita called in a private investigator. As the investigation gained traction, the women received a chilling message. Someone had accessed their personal details, including their medical records, and used them in a manner they couldn't yet understand. Days passed, and the private investigator, hired by Anita, dug deeper into Desmond's past. The news he uncovered was chilling. Desmond had been involved in a string of illegal activities in different parts of Lagos. His charm and fitness programs were just a cover for a much darker scheme. He had used his position to manipulate women into unknowingly becoming part of a dangerous business venture. Desmond's gym was merely a front for illegal substances and stolen equipment. The herbal drink he'd been giving out was laced with harmful substances, which could lead to not only fertility issues but also potentially worse side effects for long-term users. But that wasn't the worst of it. Desmond had been involved in a much larger conspiracy, with connections to dangerous criminal elements in Lagos. The women, now united by a common cause, made a pact to take down Desmond and expose his lies. But they knew it wouldn't be easy. Desmond had vanished without a trace, and the criminal network he had linked himself to was not going to let them interfere without a fight. The deeper the women delved into Desmond's life, the more disturbing the revelations became. They learned that Desmond's miracle drink was actually a concoction of steroids, hormones, and illegal substances imported under the radar. Desmond had been working with a network of underground suppliers who provided the ingredients, all under the guise of health supplements. But these ingredients weren't just harmful to their bodies. They had long-lasting effects on fertility, leading to the shocking pregnancies that none of the women had anticipated. As the investigator continued his research, he uncovered a series of shady bank transfers from Desmond's gym account, linking him to larger financial schemes that involved blackmail and exploitation. Desmond had targeted vulnerable women, those desperate for a transformation, willing to pay anything for a flat tummy. Little did they know that in their pursuit of beauty, they had unknowingly become pawns in a much larger game. The truth was far worse than they could have ever imagined. With the information they had gathered, the women made a plan to confront Desmond's associates. They knew they couldn't do it alone. They would need allies. They reached out to people who had worked at the gym, hoping to find someone willing to talk. Surprisingly, one of the gym's trainers, a man named John, came forward, claiming he had witnessed Desmond's illegal activities but was too afraid to speak up. John revealed that Desmond had been dealing with a notorious underground syndicate known for exploiting vulnerable women and using them for illegal financial gain. He also confessed that Desmond had blackmailed several gym-goers, including some of the women who had worked with him. The women, now fully aware of the danger they were in, realized they had no choice but to take down Desmond's operation, even if it meant going up against some powerful enemies. But the stakes were higher than they had ever imagined. They would have to play a dangerous game, one that could cost them everything they had. The investigation had reached a critical point. Desmond's connections to the underground syndicate were undeniable, and the women, along with John's help, had no choice but to go deeper into the dangerous web of deceit he had spun. John led them to a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of Lagos, where he believed Desmond had been meeting with the criminal elements. The women were hesitant, but they knew this was their only chance to confront the people behind Desmond's operation. Anita took the lead, her heart pounding in her chest as they approached the warehouse. The air was thick with tension as they observed the heavily guarded entrance. "We need to be smart about this," Anita whispered to the group. "We can't just barge in, we need proof." With John's guidance, they managed to sneak inside, avoiding the guards who patrolled the perimeter. Inside, the warehouse was filled with crates of what appeared to be health supplements, but the women recognized many of the labels as fraudulent. Desmond had been using fake packaging to disguise his illegal products. But their success was short-lived. Just as they snapped pictures of the crates, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind them. The women froze. They had been caught. Desmond's associates were closing in, and there was no easy way out. Panic surged through Anita's veins, but she quickly suppressed it, keeping her composure. "Stay calm," she hissed, motioning for the others to follow her lead. John, who had been trying to stay inconspicuous, whispered urgently, "We need to get out now before they realize who you are." As they made their way toward the exit, a group of armed men suddenly appeared, blocking their path. The leader, a tall man with a menacing glare, stepped forward. "Thought you could play in our world and get away with it?" he sneered, his voice low and dangerous. The women tensed, knowing they were facing far more than they had bargained for. John's face went pale, and he stepped forward, trying to defuse the situation. "These women," he began, but the man cut him off. "These women are a problem now. You've all stepped into something you don't understand." The tension in the air was palpable. The women realized that if they didn't act quickly, this could end in disaster. Just when the situation seemed hopeless, a voice echoed from behind the group. "Hold it!" A man in a tailored suit appeared, walking toward the scene with calm authority. The armed men stepped back, almost respectfully. Anita's heart skipped a beat. She recognized him immediately. It was one of Desmond's wealthy clients, someone who had always appeared friendly but distant. "Let them go," the man said with an air of command, and to Anita's surprise, the armed men lowered their weapons. The leader of the group gave a reluctant nod and stepped aside. "Who are you?" Rose asked, her voice filled with confusion. The man smiled coldly. "I'm someone who's been making sure Desmond's little operation runs smoothly. He may have vanished, but the network still thrives." His words sent a chill down their spines. Desmond wasn't just a small-time crook. He had ties to a much larger criminal empire. The women now found themselves entangled in something much more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The man introduced himself as Daniel, a high-ranking figure in a covert network of business magnates and criminals who used fitness and wellness programs as a front for money laundering and illegal trade. Desmond had been a key player in their operation, but now that he had disappeared, Daniel was tasked with keeping things under control. "We don't appreciate disruptions," Daniel said, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the women. "And Desmond's little stunt has put a lot of things at risk. He promised us clean transactions, but clearly he's gone rogue." The women exchanged looks, still in shock. It was hard to process the information. Their gym instructor, the charming man who had made them believe they were embarking on a wellness journey, had been a pawn in a much bigger game. Daniel's cold demeanor made it clear that they were now in over their heads. "We're not here to get involved in your business," Anita said firmly, her voice steely with resolve. "We just want the truth and to make sure no other women suffer like we did." Daniel chuckled darkly. "The truth? You can't handle the truth. But if you want to stay alive, you'll stop poking around. This is your last warning." With that, he turned on his heel and walked away, leaving the women to process his words. After narrowly escaping from the warehouse, the women regrouped in a safe location. Their minds were reeling from the encounter with Daniel. They knew they couldn't back down now. They had uncovered too much to let it go. But the risk was greater than ever. They were up against a powerful and dangerous network. "We can't fight this on our own," Rose said, pacing the room. "We need to take this to the authorities, but I don't trust them. Not after what happened last time." Anita nodded, her jaw set in determination. "Then we go public. We expose everything. Desmond, Daniel, the syndicate. It's the only way." They knew it would be risky, but the only way to stop the cycle of exploitation was to bring it to light. They contacted a few trusted journalists who had been reporting on illegal fitness operations, hoping to get their story out to the public. The women knew they were putting everything on the line, but they were more determined than ever to see justice served. The weight of their decision to go public hung heavily on the women's shoulders. They had already risked their lives once, and now they were preparing to expose an entire criminal network. The consequences of their actions could be catastrophic, but they had no choice. Desmond's betrayal had gone beyond personal. It was a matter of justice, not only for them but for all the other women who had unknowingly fallen victim to his deceit. Anita, who had taken the lead throughout their investigation, made the final call. "We have the evidence. We have to expose this now, before anyone else gets hurt." They met with a well-known investigative journalist, Esther, who had previously reported on fitness scams in Lagos. Esther was intrigued by their story, and after reviewing the evidence they had gathered, she agreed to help them. Together, they formulated a plan to release the story, ensuring the public would be aware of Desmond's operation and the dangerous syndicate behind it. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. The women prepared for the fallout, knowing that once the story hit the news, there would be no turning back. They could only hope that their bravery would bring about the justice they so desperately sought. The article hit the internet with a bang. It wasn't just a small blurb, it was a comprehensive exposé, detailing Desmond's operation, the harmful substances used in his products, and the larger criminal syndicate that had been exploiting women in the name of fitness. Esther's writing was sharp and fearless, and it quickly went viral, sparking outrage across Lagos. Social media was flooded with comments from women who had experienced similar treatments and suspicions, many of whom had not realized the extent of Desmond's betrayal until they read the article. As the news spread, the authorities were forced to take notice. Several investigations were launched into the syndicate, and law enforcement began rounding up key figures. Desmond's disappearance added another layer of mystery to the case, but the truth was out in the open now. The women felt a mix of relief and fear, relief that their voices were finally heard, but fear of what might come next. The criminals behind the operation wouldn't go down without a fight. The victory felt sweet at first, but the backlash came quickly. Desmond's associates, many of whom had high-level connections, began to retaliate. The women received anonymous threats, warning them to stay quiet or face the consequences. John, who had helped them from the start, received the worst of it. His family was targeted, and his personal safety was compromised. Anita, Rose, and Kemi found themselves in constant fear, aware that the syndicate would do whatever it took to silence them. "We can't back down now," Anita said, her voice steady despite the fear she felt. "We've already come this far. We're not going to let them intimidate us into silence." The women strengthened their resolve, refusing to let fear control them. They knew they couldn't stop now. There were still many people who were unaware of Desmond's manipulative tactics, and they couldn't let the syndicate continue its exploitation. The battle was far from over. Despite the exposure of Desmond's criminal activities, the man himself remained elusive. He had gone into hiding, and the authorities struggled to find any trace of him. It was as though he had disappeared off the face of the earth. But the women weren't ready to give up. They continued to search for leads, pushing forward with the investigation and trying to piece together the last few pieces of the puzzle. John, who had remained in touch with them, uncovered a lead. Desmond had once mentioned a safe house in an isolated part of Lagos. It was their only chance to find him. The women, along with John, made plans to search the location. They knew the risks involved, but they couldn't afford to waste time. They needed Desmond. He was the key to taking down the entire network. The journey to the safe house was long and filled with uncertainty. As they neared the secluded area, the tension was palpable. Anita, Rose, and Kemi shared a moment of silent understanding. They had already risked so much, and now they were walking into the lion's den. When they finally arrived at the safe house, they approached cautiously, looking for any signs of life. John, who had been to the area before, led the way. The safe house was a large, nondescript building surrounded by high walls, and the women knew it was their only shot at finding Desmond. As they entered the house, a chilling silence greeted them. The place looked abandoned, with no sign of Desmond. But just as they were about to leave, Anita noticed something unusual. An old, dusty laptop left behind on a table. She opened it, and to her surprise, there was a file containing Desmond's entire list of clients, including detailed notes on the substances he had been selling. The evidence was even more damning than they had expected. With the new evidence in hand, the women knew the end was near. Desmond's network was crumbling, and he was running out of places to hide. The authorities, now armed with concrete proof of his illegal dealings, were closing in on him. But Desmond, ever the slippery character, had one last trick up his sleeve. He reached out to the women directly, sending them a cryptic message. "You think you've won, but you're only getting started. You've just exposed the tip of the iceberg." The message was a chilling reminder of the power the syndicate still wielded. Desmond wasn't just a fitness instructor. He was a cog in a much larger machine. The women had unknowingly stepped into a world of crime that reached far beyond what they had imagined. But they couldn't turn back now. The final showdown was approaching, and they would stop at nothing to bring Desmond and his entire network to justice. Desmond's message had sent a ripple of unease through the group. They had thought they were on the verge of a resolution, but now they knew the fight was far from over. The cryptic warning was a chilling reminder that the network they had exposed was far-reaching, and Desmond still held many cards in play. "We can't afford to relax," Anita said, pacing the small room where they had gathered. "We need to move quickly. The more we wait, the more time he has to cover his tracks." John, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "I have a contact inside the police force. They've been reluctant to act, but now that we have enough evidence, I think they'll listen." The decision was made. They would take the evidence to the authorities and push for immediate action. However, they had learned the hard way that corruption ran deep, even within the police. Desmond's connections had made sure that many were compromised, so they couldn't trust anyone completely. John's contact, Detective Austin, would have to be their trusted ally. Detective Austin had been a reluctant ally at first. He was aware of Desmond's reputation but had never had enough evidence to arrest him. However, after seeing the files and the explosive nature of their findings, he seemed more than willing to help. He assured them that the arrest was imminent, but something about his demeanor felt off to Anita. Later that night, as they sat in a safe house, waiting for news, Rose received a frantic call. It was from a former gym member, who had been warned by someone on the inside that Desmond was onto them. "Austin is working with Desmond," the woman whispered urgently. "I overheard him speaking about it. He's been feeding information to him." The revelation hit them like a punch to the gut. Austin, who they had trusted, was now revealed as a traitor. Desmond had infiltrated even the police, and this betrayal made everything even more dangerous. They could no longer trust anyone. Desmond had always been a step ahead, and now they had to outsmart him before it was too late. With the knowledge that Austin had betrayed them, the women's trust in everyone was shattered. They knew that the final confrontation with Desmond was drawing near, and they had to be strategic. Desmond was unpredictable, and now they understood he was working with people they had never even suspected. Anita decided they needed to find out what Desmond's true agenda was. What was he really after? The stolen gym equipment and illegal substances were just the surface. There had to be a larger goal behind everything. They scoured through the files they had taken from the safe house, piecing together any information that might give them a clue. After hours of combing through the documents, Rose uncovered a shocking discovery. Desmond had been laundering money for a corrupt network of international drug cartels. The illegal substances he had been selling were part of a much bigger scheme involving global smuggling operations. Desmond was just a small player in this far-reaching conspiracy, and the women had unknowingly walked into the heart of it all. The women knew they had no time to waste. Desmond's syndicate was far more dangerous than they had anticipated, and the deeper they dug, the more they realized they were up against a global criminal empire. They couldn't rely on the authorities anymore. Austin had proved that. It was up to them to take matters into their own hands. As they prepared to go into hiding, a last-minute tip came through from an anonymous source. Desmond had left Lagos and was heading to a remote location where a final shipment of drugs was being processed. This was their last chance to stop him. John was hesitant but knew this was their moment. This is it. If we can get to him before he disappears, we can shut down this operation once and for all. The women set off toward the location, determined to put an end to Desmond's reign of terror. But as they approached, Anita felt an unsettling feeling in her gut. They were walking straight into the lion's den, and this time, there would be no escape if they weren't careful. The remote location was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the bustling chaos of Lagos. As they arrived, they could see the shadowy figures of men unloading crates from a large truck. Desmond was there, overseeing the operation. The women and John, now with the help of a few trusted allies, prepared to confront him once and for all. They approached quietly, staying out of sight, hoping to catch Desmond off guard. But their luck ran out when one of Desmond's men noticed them lurking nearby. A chase ensued through the narrow alleys and dense forests surrounding the warehouse. Desmond's men, armed and aggressive, fired shots in their direction as they tried to make their escape. Anita, Rose, and Kemi sprinted ahead, with John close behind. The sound of their pursuers grew louder, but they refused to slow down. They had come too far to be caught now. The final confrontation was fast approaching, and Desmond wouldn't get away this time. The chase led them to an abandoned warehouse, where the final standoff with Desmond and his crew seemed inevitable. The women, breathless and adrenaline-fueled, ducked behind large crates, trying to formulate a plan while John circled the perimeter, looking for an escape route. Desmond's men had surrounded the area, but the women's determination kept them focused. They knew they couldn't wait any longer. They had come too far to let fear control them now. Anita took charge, signaling for Rose and Kemi to move into position. They had to confront Desmond directly. There was no other choice. The tension was thick as Desmond appeared in the distance, flanked by several armed men. His smug expression faded as he saw the women emerge from the shadows. "I should have known you wouldn't give up," he sneered. "You've caused enough trouble, but now it's over. You've lost." Anita stepped forward, her voice steady despite the danger. "We haven't lost yet, Desmond. It's you who's going down today." The air crackled with tension as Desmond's men raised their weapons, aiming directly at the women and John. A split second before anything could escalate, John lunged forward, tackling one of Desmond's men to the ground. The chaos that followed was chaotic, as shots rang out and the women scrambled for cover. Rose and Kemi fought back with everything they had, using anything within reach to defend themselves. Desmond stood at a distance, shouting orders to his men, but his cool exterior had started to crack. The once confident gym instructor now realized that his empire was crumbling before his eyes. With each passing minute, the battle grew fiercer, but Anita remained focused. She spotted Desmond trying to slip away in the confusion and knew that this was her chance. She darted forward, her heart racing as she closed the gap between them. Desmond had no idea what was coming. Anita reached Desmond just as he was about to disappear into a side exit. She grabbed him by the arm, pulling him back. "You're not going anywhere," she said, her voice low and filled with determination. Desmond struggled, trying to break free, but Anita's grip was firm. "You think you can just walk away after everything you've done? After all the lives you've destroyed?" she demanded. Desmond laughed, though there was no humor in his voice. "You have no idea what you're up against. My people will come for you. This is just the beginning." But Anita didn't flinch. She had heard these threats before. She tightened her hold on him and turned to John. "We've got him. It's over." As the authorities arrived on the scene, Desmond was handcuffed and taken into custody. The women could barely breathe a sigh of relief. They had won, but they knew the battle had taken everything out of them. Desmond's arrest was just the beginning. The women knew they had to continue the fight, especially now that they were faced with the full scope of the criminal empire Desmond had been involved in. The authorities quickly uncovered that the illegal substances Desmond had been selling were part of a much larger operation, one that spanned several countries and involved powerful international players. The women were called in to testify, but they remained determined to see the case through to the end. They had already sacrificed so much, and they wouldn't stop until every criminal involved was brought to justice. They also began receiving support from organizations that fought against exploitation in the fitness industry. Their story had inspired others to come forward with similar experiences, and soon the web of corruption began to unravel. Desmond's network was exposed, and the women, along with John, became key witnesses in the trial that followed. The case gained international attention, and what started as a small fitness scam had now grown into a global scandal. The trial against Desmond and his associates was nothing short of a spectacle. The courtroom was filled with people from all walks of life: journalists, activists, and victims who had been affected by Desmond's scheme. The women sat in the front row, unwavering in their resolve. They were no longer just victims. They had become warriors for justice. Desmond's defense team tried to paint him as a victim of circumstance, claiming that he had been coerced into the criminal network. But the evidence was overwhelming. The files, the testimonies, and the drug trafficking connections all painted a clear picture of his guilt. Desmond's charm and deceit had finally caught up to him. As the trial continued, the women's bravery was recognized by the public. They were hailed as heroes, the ones who had exposed the truth and brought down a dangerous criminal empire. But despite the accolades, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were still only beginning to understand the full extent of the damage Desmond had caused. The days following Desmond's conviction were filled with mixed emotions. The victory was sweet, but the scars of the past few months remained. The women had lost so much: trust, security, and a part of themselves they would never regain. But they had also gained something invaluable: justice. Anita, Rose, and Kemi sat together in a quiet cafe, reflecting on everything they had been through. They had changed in ways they couldn't fully explain. The journey had taken them to the brink of despair and back, but they had emerged stronger. "We did it," Rose said, her voice filled with a quiet pride. "We took down a criminal empire. But I think we also found out what we're made of." Anita nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "We found our strength. And we're not going to let anyone take that away from us." The women knew their lives would never be the same, but they had one another, and that was enough. They had fought for justice, and in the end, they had won. As the dust settled, the women found themselves at a crossroads. Their lives had been irrevocably changed by the events surrounding Desmond's downfall. Yet, despite the trauma and hardship they'd faced, they were ready to embrace the future. Anita, Rose, and Kemi began to reflect on what they truly wanted now that the battle was over. They had all been affected by Desmond's manipulation, but they were determined not to let his actions define their futures. Anita, the most reserved of the group, had always dreamed of opening her own fitness studio, one that promoted safe and healthy practices. With the financial settlement from the trial, she was able to start turning that dream into a reality. She had learned firsthand what it meant to trust someone, and she vowed that her gym would be a safe haven for women, where they could feel empowered rather than exploited. Rose, always passionate about social causes, decided to pursue a career in activism, focusing on women's rights and exposing corruption in the fitness industry. She had seen how easily people could be taken advantage of and wanted to be part of the solution, not just for herself but for others who might fall victim to the same schemes. Kemi, ever the adventurer, decided to leave Lagos for a while and travel the world, seeking new experiences and healing from everything that had happened. She had been forced to confront dark truths about herself, but now she was ready to embrace life with a fresh perspective. Though their lives had taken different paths, the bond between the women remained unbreakable. They continued to meet regularly, supporting one another as they navigated the complexities of their new lives. Desmond's actions had caused irreparable damage, but they had come to realize that their healing wasn't just about exposing the truth, it was also about forgiving themselves and each other. Anita had always been the most reluctant to forgive, holding on to anger and resentment. But through therapy and personal growth, she began to understand that healing was a choice. She had to let go of the past to fully embrace the future. Rose and Kemi had already been on their own journeys of healing, but watching Anita slowly open up to forgiveness inspired them all. They began to see that the scars of the past could coexist with the hope for a brighter future. "It's not about forgetting what happened," Rose said one day, her voice thoughtful. "It's about learning from it, growing, and becoming stronger." Kemi smiled, "and forgiving ourselves along the way." While the women moved forward with their new lives, Desmond's world was crumbling. His arrest had set off a chain reaction, with his accomplices being rounded up and facing serious charges. His once glamorous life was now in shambles, and he was left to confront the consequences of his actions. Desmond was sentenced to a long prison term for his role in the illegal activities, and his connections to the drug trafficking syndicates were exposed to the world. He had thought he could manipulate his way out of anything, but in the end, his arrogance had led to his downfall. Behind bars, Desmond began to reflect on everything that had led to his demise. His charm, once a powerful tool, had been his undoing. He had underestimated the strength of the women he had tried to control, and now, he was paying the price for his mistakes. As he sat in his cell, Desmond knew that no amount of manipulation or charm could erase the damage he had done. He had underestimated his victims, and that would be the final lesson he would learn. Years passed, and the women continued to flourish in their new endeavors. Anita's gym had become a successful business, attracting women from all walks of life who were looking for a safe space to work out and grow. She had built a team of trainers who shared her vision, and together, they had created a community that was supportive and empowering. Rose had risen to prominence in the activist world, using her voice to bring attention to issues affecting women, especially in the fitness industry. She had authored a book detailing her experiences and the lessons she had learned, inspiring others to take a stand against exploitation. Kemi, after years of traveling and soul-searching, had returned to Lagos and started her own travel blog, sharing stories of healing and transformation. She had built a loyal following, and her platform became a space for women to connect and find support during challenging times. The women had each found their own path, but their friendship remained the constant thread that connected them. They had been through hell together, and now, they were flourishing in ways they had never imagined. As they gathered one evening to reflect on everything they had been through, Rose raised a glass. "To us," she said, smiling. "We've been through the fire, and we came out stronger. Here's to the future." As the women settled into their new lives, they were faced with a new challenge that none of them had anticipated. A new wave of gym scandals had begun to surface in Lagos. Unscrupulous trainers were taking advantage of women, just as Desmond had done years ago. Though the women were proud of what they had accomplished, they knew they couldn't sit idly by while others were being exploited. They decided to come together once more to address the new wave of corruption. Anita, Rose, and Kemi began to speak out publicly, warning women about the dangers of trusting the wrong people in the fitness industry. They launched a campaign to educate women on how to recognize red flags and avoid falling prey to manipulation. They also partnered with local authorities and organizations to hold those responsible accountable. "We've been through too much to let this happen to anyone else," Anita said one day, her voice resolute. "We're stronger than we've ever been, and we're not backing down." As the women rallied to raise awareness, they discovered that the corruption in the fitness industry was far more pervasive than they had initially thought. Desmond had been a small cog in a much larger machine, and the more they dug into the new wave of exploitation, the deeper they were drawn into a dangerous game. Anita, Rose, and Kemi faced growing opposition. Threats started coming in from shadowy figures who seemed determined to silence them. Anonymous messages and calls warned them to stop their campaign or face the consequences. But the women, having already faced far worse, refused to back down. "You think we'll stop because of a few threats?" Rose said, her voice fiery as they gathered to discuss their next steps. "If anything, this proves we're onto something big." The women decided to escalate their efforts, involving the media and public figures who could lend their voices to the cause. They worked with investigative journalists who helped expose the growing network of corrupt gym instructors and fitness professionals exploiting women for their own gain. The more they exposed, the more dangerous the game became. Someone didn't want the truth to come out. As they worked with journalists and other activists to expose the corrupt network, the women found that their ranks weren't as solid as they had hoped. A betrayal from within rocked their efforts when one of their trusted associates, a former trainer at Anita's gym, turned out to be working with the corrupt trainers they were trying to expose. It was Kemi who first suspected something was off. She had been working closely with the associate on a marketing campaign aimed at spreading their message to a wider audience, but strange behavior and unexplainable delays raised red flags. When she investigated further, she uncovered that the associate had been feeding confidential information to the very people they were trying to expose. The women were devastated. They had thought they were making strides, but now they had to contend with an insider who had betrayed their trust. They immediately confronted the associate, who attempted to justify their actions by claiming they were being blackmailed by the corrupt fitness network. The associate's motivations became clear. Fear of the powerful people behind the scheme had driven them to cooperate. Despite the betrayal, the women decided to press on, knowing that exposing the full extent of the conspiracy was the only way to stop it. As the women continued their campaign, the resistance they faced grew more intense. Threats became more specific, and attempts to discredit them in the media started to surface. Anita, Rose, and Kemi realized that they were up against an organized and powerful group, one that had deep ties not only within the fitness industry but also in high places across the city. But instead of succumbing to fear, the women became more determined. They began operating more cautiously, knowing that they were being watched. They communicated only through secure channels and met in secret locations to avoid drawing attention to themselves. Rose took the lead in forming alliances with other activists and community groups, all of whom had been affected by the corruption they were fighting. It was a silent resistance, a movement growing quietly in the shadows but with enough power to disrupt the system from within. "Let them watch us," Rose said one night as they gathered in a safe house. "The more they try to silence us, the stronger we become. We'll get this out, no matter what." Anita, who had once feared the unknown, now exuded confidence. "We've already beaten Desmond. We're not going to let these threats stop us now." Desmond's conviction had been a victory, but it hadn't been the end. As the women pushed further into the investigation, they learned that the corrupt network they were targeting had connections that went all the way up the political ladder. Powerful figures with a vested interest in keeping the fitness industry unregulated were pulling strings to maintain their dominance. In an unexpected twist, the women learned that their efforts had begun to make a bigger impact than they had anticipated. As they uncovered evidence of money laundering, illegal drug distribution, and even human trafficking tied to the gym operations, the authorities began taking notice. But the network wasn't about to let them succeed. The women were now faced with a more dangerous situation than ever before. Desmond, behind bars, was no longer the greatest threat they faced. The real danger now lay in the shadows, as powerful people with vast resources closed in on them. In a bold move, Anita, Rose, and Kemi decided to take the fight directly to the heart of the operation. They infiltrated one of the larger, more secretive gyms in the city, determined to gather the final pieces of evidence they needed to bring the entire network down. Infiltrating the gym was no easy feat. Anita, Rose, and Kemi had to disguise themselves and gain the trust of the people who ran the operations behind the scenes. They took jobs as trainers, assistants, and even customers, each playing a different role to gather information. At first, the gym seemed like any other: slick equipment, a flashy interior, and a facade of health and fitness. But beneath the surface, the true nature of the operation was revealed. It was a well-oiled machine that not only exploited women but also trafficked drugs and used the fitness industry as a front for criminal activities. The women worked undercover for weeks, gathering intel while also trying to stay under the radar. They met with other women who had been coerced into staying silent about their experiences, slowly earning their trust. They shared their own stories, helping the women find their voices and stand up against the manipulation. But time was running out. The network was starting to catch on, and the women knew that the deeper they got, the more dangerous their mission became. As the days passed, the tension inside the gym began to mount. The women knew they were getting closer to uncovering the full extent of the operation, but their cover was quickly beginning to crack. Anita, Rose, and Kemi had grown accustomed to the daily routine, but they could feel the eyes of the gym's top managers on them. They were being watched closely, and the pressure was taking its toll. One evening, as Anita worked late, she overheard a conversation between two gym managers discussing a secret shipment of unregulated substances being delivered to the facility. Her heart raced. This was the break they had been waiting for. She quickly relayed the information to Rose and Kemi, who had been working at different parts of the gym. The shipment could contain not only illegal substances but also critical evidence to bring down the entire network. But with their cover on the verge of being blown, the women knew they had to act fast. It was time for their final push, to gather irrefutable evidence and expose the criminals before they were caught. However, they were at the breaking point, emotionally and physically drained. They had no choice but to risk it all. The night of the shipment arrived, and everything was set. Anita, Rose, and Kemi had made plans to sneak into the warehouse, where the illegal substances were being stored. They had been preparing for this moment for weeks, learning the schedules of the gym staff and identifying the weak points in security. With their nerves steeled, the women snuck into the warehouse under the cover of darkness. They carefully avoided the security cameras and dodged the gym's guards as they made their way deeper into the storage area. Every creak of the floorboards and every distant sound made their hearts race, but they kept moving forward. Finally, they found the shipment, the sealed crates filled with illegal drugs and unregulated supplements. The women worked quickly, taking photographs, recording videos, and securing physical evidence. But as they turned to leave, they were confronted by one of the gym's top managers, who had caught wind of their operation. The manager's voice was cold and threatening. "You think you can expose us?" he sneered. "You'll regret this." With the manager advancing toward them, the women's hearts pounded in their chests. It was a race against time, and they had to act fast. They had all but finished gathering the evidence, but getting out alive was their top priority now. Without hesitation, Anita grabbed a fire extinguisher and sprayed it directly at the manager's face, blinding him temporarily. The three women sprinted toward the exit, adrenaline coursing through their veins. They could hear the manager shouting behind them, but they didn't stop. They couldn't afford to. They made it to the back gate of the gym, where Rose had already unlocked it as part of their escape plan. Just as they dashed out into the dark alley, they heard the screeching of car tires, signaling that their pursuers were hot on their trail. With nowhere else to run, they darted into a nearby alleyway and hid behind a dumpster, praying they wouldn't be seen. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours, but eventually, the sounds of the car faded into the distance. They had narrowly escaped, but they knew this was only the beginning. Their next move would be critical. They had the evidence, but now they had to expose the entire operation before it was too late. The following days were filled with tension as the women decided on their next steps. They knew that they couldn't keep the evidence to themselves any longer. They had gathered irrefutable proof of the gym's involvement in illegal activities, but they needed a safe way to release it to the public without putting themselves in further danger. Rose, ever resourceful, contacted a journalist friend from the investigative network they had been working with. She arranged a covert meeting where they handed over the evidence, including the video footage and photographs. The journalist was shocked by the extent of the corruption they had uncovered, but agreed to help them expose it. The next day, the story broke. News outlets across the city picked up the scandal, with images of the illegal substances and the gym's shady dealings plastered on every front page. The gym chain's owners and high-ranking staff members were named, and authorities were quick to seize the goods and shut down the operation. But even as the women celebrated their success, they knew that the criminals they had exposed would not go down easily. There was still much to be done, and they would have to stay vigilant. The battle was far from over. As the media frenzy intensified, the women began receiving messages from anonymous sources threatening their lives. The corrupt network they had exposed was vast and powerful, and now that the authorities were closing in on them, the remaining criminals were desperate to cover their tracks. The women knew they had made enemies who would stop at nothing to protect their operation. Anita, Rose, and Kemi held firm in their commitment to expose the truth. They continued to work with law enforcement, providing testimony and sharing what they knew about the higher-ups involved in the scheme. But as the threats grew more serious, they knew they couldn't do it alone. They needed protection. With the help of the investigative journalists, they were placed under witness protection while authorities worked to round up the remaining members of the criminal network. It was a hard choice for the women, leaving behind their homes, their lives, and their identities, but it was the only way they could ensure their safety. As they drove away from Lagos, leaving behind the city they had fought so hard to change, they looked at each other with mixed emotions. They had won, but the price had been steep. The months that followed were a period of adjustment and reflection for Anita, Rose, and Kemi. Under witness protection, they found themselves in unfamiliar surroundings, far from Lagos and the life they once knew. They had succeeded in exposing the corrupt gym operation, but the trauma of the events and the constant threat of retribution hung over them like a shadow. Rose, ever the optimist, kept encouraging the others to look toward the future. "We've survived the worst," she would say. "Now it's time to rebuild." Anita struggled with the weight of their decision to leave their old lives behind. She had lost her business, her friends, and the city she had worked so hard to thrive in. But slowly, with the support of her two friends, she began to see that the world was still full of possibilities. Kemi, always the thinker, spent time researching ways to help other women who had been affected by similar exploitation. She felt a responsibility to continue the fight in a different way, using her knowledge and experience to educate others and prevent what had happened to them from happening again. The women agreed that once they were settled, they would begin working on a new project. One focused on empowering women to take control of their health, fitness, and finances, without falling prey to the schemes they had so narrowly escaped. While they worked on their new project, the women began to rebuild their sense of trust in the world around them. The trauma of being betrayed, hunted, and forced into hiding had made them wary of everyone and everything. Anita found it hardest to trust again. She had been manipulated and used by Desmond, someone she had once thought of as a colleague and friend. His betrayal had shattered her faith in the fitness industry and, at times, in herself. She spent long hours reflecting on her role in the events that unfolded, struggling to forgive herself for not seeing the signs earlier. Rose, ever the strong one, encouraged Anita to let go of her guilt. "You did what you had to do," she said. "You fought for the truth. We all did." It wasn't easy, but Anita slowly started to accept that their fight wasn't just about bringing down Desmond. It was about giving other women the chance to live freely and without fear of exploitation. 6 months had passed since the exposure of the gym network, and the women were finally ready to make their mark on the world once more. They had taken the time to heal, to educate themselves on creating a safer and more inclusive fitness environment, and to prepare for the future. Anita had started a new fitness business, one built on integrity and transparency. She offered free training sessions and workshops to women who had fallen victim to the types of schemes she had once unknowingly participated in. Her business wasn't just about fitness. It was about restoring self-esteem and empowering others to take control of their lives. Rose had begun working with local authorities to design programs that would prevent future exploitation in the fitness industry. She also worked as a mentor, helping young women who had faced similar challenges. Her work brought her a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. Kemi had dedicated herself to advocacy. She worked with several organizations that supported survivors of exploitation, using her platform to raise awareness about the dangers of unscrupulous fitness practices and to educate others on how to spot red flags. Together, the women were stronger than they had ever been. They had turned their experience into a force for good, and they were now ready to make a lasting impact on the world. The first major project that the women took on was a series of workshops for women in various communities. They traveled to different parts of the country, providing practical advice on how to stay safe in the fitness industry, how to choose a reputable gym, and how to recognize manipulation or abuse. The workshops were a hit, attracting large crowds and generating media attention. Women from all walks of life came forward to share their stories, many of them expressing gratitude for the resources and information the women provided. "It's not just about fitness," Anita said during one of the sessions. "It's about taking back control of your body and your life." The workshops were more than just a way to educate women, they became a movement. The women quickly realized that they had not only healed themselves but were also helping others find their strength and their voice. Though the path ahead was long and filled with challenges, they knew they had the support of each other, and that made all the difference. Just when they thought their mission was beginning to stabilize, the women were approached by a new ally, Amira, a prominent social media influencer who had recently gone public with her own experience of being exploited by a fitness trainer. Amira had a large following and a reputation for speaking out against injustice. Her story mirrored the experiences of Anita, Rose, and Kemi, and when she reached out to them for guidance, they saw an opportunity to collaborate. Together, they could reach an even wider audience and amplify their message. Amira's presence in the movement was a game changer. Her online platform helped spread the word about the women's workshops, and soon, more women from all over the country were coming forward with their own stories. The movement was growing, and with it, the potential to make real, lasting change. "Together, we can break the silence," Amira said during a live-streamed interview. "We can make the fitness world a safer place for all women." Just when things seemed to be falling into place, the past came rushing back. Desmond, the man who had started it all, had resurfaced. News reports surfaced that he had been released from prison on a technicality and was attempting to rebuild his life. For the women, this was a harsh reminder that their battle was not over. Desmond's influence was still felt in the fitness community, and his potential to harm others was something they couldn't ignore. Anita felt conflicted. Part of her wanted to confront him directly, to hold him accountable for his role in the chaos. But she also knew that they had already done everything in their power to expose him. Now, they had to focus on continuing their mission and not letting him derail everything they had worked for. "I think we've done enough," Rose said. "Desmond is just a small part of this. We need to keep pushing forward, for the women who are still vulnerable." But even as they moved forward, Desmond's reappearance reminded them that the fight for justice was far from over. Desmond's reappearance in the fitness industry sent shockwaves through the women's movement. He wasn't just trying to rebuild his reputation. He was targeting the same women they had been helping. Anonymous reports came in about suspicious activities at some gyms he had been spotted at. Illegal substances, blackmail, and fraudulent fitness programs were all allegedly part of his operations. The women knew they couldn't let him continue without consequences. But Desmond was no longer the man they had first met. He was a changed man with more resources and connections than before. His former allies in the fitness world were backing him up, and they had money and influence on their side. Kemi, ever the strategist, called for a meeting with the women. "We need to be prepared for a long battle," she said. "Desmond has the power to make things difficult for us, but we can't let him win." The women knew this wasn't just about their personal vendetta anymore. It was about protecting the women who had come forward and ensuring the safety of future generations. They decided to take Desmond down once and for all, but they knew it wouldn't be easy. The women spent the next few weeks gathering information about Desmond's new operations. With the help of Amira's social media reach, they were able to uncover hidden links between him and a network of underground fitness influencers who used questionable practices to manipulate their followers. The deeper they dug, the more unsettling the revelations became. Desmond was not just targeting women's bodies for profit, but he was also involved in money laundering, using gym memberships and fitness products as a front for illicit activities. Kemi and Rose took the lead in tracking the money trail, while Anita and Amira worked on documenting the stories of victims who had fallen for Desmond's new scams. The closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous the situation became. Desmond had connections to powerful figures who could easily derail their progress if they weren't careful. "We have to move fast," Anita said during one of their strategy meetings. "If we expose this too late, it will be too big for us to handle." One evening, as Anita was leaving a meeting, she received an ominous phone call. The voice on the other end was distorted, but the message was clear. They knew what she was doing, and they were watching. The caller warned her to stop digging into Desmond's activities or face severe consequences. Anita felt the blood drain from her face. She had been prepared for this, but hearing it out loud made the threat feel all the more real. She shared the news with Rose and Kemi, who immediately started to take extra precautions. The last thing they wanted was for Desmond's shadow to cast over them once again. But they couldn't let fear control them. "If he thinks he can scare us into backing down, he's wrong," Rose said defiantly. "We're stronger than that now." As the women prepared for the next phase of their campaign, the threat of Desmond and his allies loomed over them. But they were determined to see it through, no matter the cost. Realizing they could no longer fight this battle alone, the women reached out to their broader network of supporters. Amira used her platform to rally influencers and activists, while Rose contacted local law enforcement to get their backing. "We need to show Desmond that he doesn't have the upper hand anymore," Kemi said as they planned their next steps. "If we expose his network, he'll have no choice but to back down." But as they sought allies, they also found themselves facing resistance from some unexpected places. Not everyone was willing to stand up against Desmond, especially given his connections to powerful figures in the fitness industry. Some gym owners were hesitant to speak out, fearing they would lose their business or be targeted by Desmond's people. It was clear that the deeper they got into this fight, the more they would have to rely on each other and their most trusted supporters. But the women were resolute. They had come too far to turn back now. The stress of the ongoing battle was starting to take its toll. Anita found herself increasingly exhausted, not just physically but emotionally as well. The pressure of keeping the movement going while dealing with the personal threats from Desmond's associates left her feeling drained. She confided in Rose one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. It feels like every step we take forward, we're pushed 2 steps back." Rose placed a hand on her shoulder, offering comfort. "We've been through worse. We're still here, fighting. We can't give up now. Think of all the women we've helped, and all the women we can still help. We're making a difference, Anita." Anita nodded, grateful for Rose's unwavering support. But deep down, she knew that the upcoming confrontation with Desmond would be their toughest challenge yet. They had no choice but to face him head-on and hope that their efforts would lead to justice. The day had come. The women, with the support of their allies, had gathered all the evidence they needed to bring Desmond down. They had gathered testimonies, financial records, and irrefutable proof of his illegal activities. It was time to expose him once and for all. The women walked into the press conference with a sense of resolve. Their hearts raced, but they knew that this was the moment they had been waiting for. The media room was packed, and the cameras were rolling. Desmond's reputation was about to come crashing down. Anita took the microphone first. Today, we stand here not just as survivors, but as women who refuse to let others be exploited. We are here to expose the truth about Desmond's operation and the dark reality behind his promises of flat tummy transformations. As the press conference unfolded, Desmond's involvement in criminal activities was revealed in full, and the women's bravery in coming forward inspired a wave of support from women across the country. Desmond's empire began to crumble as law enforcement moved in to arrest him and his accomplices. For the first time in a long while, Anita felt a sense of peace. The battle was over, and they had won. With Desmond finally in police custody and his criminal activities exposed, the women took a moment to reflect on all they had accomplished. The sense of relief was overwhelming, but so was the realization that their lives would never be the same. They had endured so much, fought through immense pressure, and risked everything to bring justice to those who had suffered. But as the days passed, the aftermath was not as peaceful as they had hoped. The media buzzed with reports, and public opinion fluctuated. Some applauded their courage, while others tried to discredit their actions, questioning their motives. The women knew they had done the right thing, but the weight of the situation was still heavy. Amira struggled with the backlash from certain sectors of the fitness industry, who felt that the scandal had tainted the entire profession. "It's not just Desmond we're up against," she said one evening. "It's the system he helped build, and it's not going to be easy to tear that down." Despite the challenges, the women remained steadfast in their mission. They had taken down one man, but they knew they had to continue their fight against the corruption that still lingered. As the dust settled and Desmond's trial began, the women began to shift their focus toward rebuilding their own lives and careers. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they had the strength and resilience to move forward. They were no longer just victims of Desmond's manipulation. They were survivors, and they had a voice that would never be silenced again. Kemi started a wellness campaign to educate women about safe fitness practices and the dangers of shortcuts that promised quick results. She used her platform to share stories of strength and perseverance, helping women reclaim their bodies and their confidence. Rose opened her own fitness studio, one that prioritized health and holistic wellness over unrealistic expectations. It quickly became a safe space for women who had been hurt by the fitness industry's focus on appearance over well-being. Amira, on the other hand, used her influence to advocate for stricter regulations in the fitness industry, pushing for more accountability and transparency from trainers and influencers. The women's efforts started to pay off as they garnered support from others who were passionate about change. They had not only survived their battle with Desmond, but they had also emerged as leaders in a movement that was reshaping the fitness industry for good. Desmond's trial was a spectacle that captivated the nation. As the details of his illegal activities were laid bare in court, the public began to see the full extent of his manipulation. Women who had been afraid to speak out now stood in front of the courtroom, recounting their experiences with him. The case was not just about Desmond anymore. It was about all the women he had deceived, hurt, and exploited. The courtrooms were filled with the voices of those he had tried to silence. It became clear that his empire of lies and corruption was about to collapse. When the verdict was read, Desmond was sentenced to a long prison term. The women watched from the front row, their faces a mixture of relief and triumph. Desmond's downfall was a victory, not just for them, but for every woman who had ever been manipulated by a predatory figure in the fitness industry. But as the case came to a close, the women realized that this was only the beginning of a larger mission. There was still much work to be done, and they would continue to fight for justice and equality. The months after Desmond's conviction brought a sense of calm, but the emotional scars of their ordeal remained. Anita, in particular, struggled with the weight of everything she had been through. Despite the victory, the toll it had taken on her personal life was undeniable. She found it difficult to fully enjoy the peace she had fought so hard for. One evening, Rose noticed Anita staring out of the window, lost in thought. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. Anita turned to her, a faint smile on her face. "I thought I would feel different," she said quietly. "I thought when it was all over, I'd feel free. But sometimes, it's hard to let go of the past." Rose sat beside her, offering her comfort. "The journey has changed us all. We'll never be the same, but we can use what we've learned to build something better. Don't carry the weight of the past forever. You've already done more than most could ever dream of." Anita nodded, slowly allowing herself to feel the freedom that was beginning to return. It would take time, but she knew she had the support of her friends and the knowledge that they had truly made a difference. As the year came to a close, the women reflected on the tumultuous journey they had been through. They had faced danger, betrayal, and heartbreak, but they had emerged victorious. Desmond's reign of manipulation and deceit was over, and the women were now pioneers in a movement that was changing the fitness industry for the better. But as they looked forward to the future, they knew there would always be more challenges ahead. Desmond's network of supporters, though shattered, still lingered in the shadows. There would always be those who sought to exploit others for personal gain. But the women had learned that together, they were unstoppable. They had proven that even in the face of adversity, they could rise above and fight for what was right. They had reclaimed their power and were now using it to help others. Their fight was far from over, but they were ready. The future was theirs to shape, and they would continue to work tirelessly to make sure that no one else had to suffer at the hands of predators like Desmond. The last chapter in Desmond's story had been written. His name would forever be associated with betrayal and manipulation, but the women had moved on. They had built new lives, new careers, and new identities. What had started as a journey of survival had transformed into one of empowerment and change. Kemi, Rose, Amira, and Anita had become role models in their community and beyond. Their work was making a lasting impact on the fitness industry, and their voices were being heard. They knew that their fight was not just for justice, but for a future where women could thrive in every aspect of their lives, free from the exploitation that had once threatened to destroy them. As they looked forward, they knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges. But they were ready, and whatever came next, they would face it together. Their story was far from over. It was only just beginning. As the years passed, the impact of the women's fight for justice continued to reverberate through Lagos and beyond. Their journey, once marked by pain and struggle, had blossomed into a story of resilience. The fitness industry had undergone significant reform, and women everywhere were finding the courage to speak out against exploitation and manipulation. Kemi's wellness campaign had grown into a national movement, offering resources and safe spaces for women to reclaim their health and their confidence. Rose's fitness studio had expanded into multiple locations, each embodying the principles of honesty, health, and self-love. Amira's advocacy led to stricter regulations, holding trainers accountable for their actions and ensuring that no woman would ever be deceived like they had been. And Anita, once haunted by her past, had found peace. She had turned her experience into a best-selling book, sharing her story with the world and inspiring countless others to stand up for themselves. Her voice had become a beacon for women everywhere, and she was now a sought-after speaker at conferences and seminars on self-worth and personal empowerment. As the women sat together one last time, reflecting on how far they had come, they realized that their fight had not only changed their lives, it had changed the world. They had turned their pain into purpose, their struggles into triumphs, and they had shown everyone that, no matter the odds, women could rise above and create the future they deserved. The story of Desmond, the charming gym instructor who had sought to destroy them, was now a distant memory. And as they looked ahead, the future was bright. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Kindly share, subscribe, and hit the bell button for more stories like this.